What's up, everyone? The NBA draft finally is in the books. It went for about 3.5 days, and Milwaukee, very late in the piece, got back involved. But we're going to be talking about MarJon Beauchamp, pick 24, and then a bit of Hugo Besson later on in the podcast. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday. Also find my work at ESPN, and alongside me, the founder of brewhoop.com, longtime voice of the podcast, host of many draft parties, including tonight, Frank Madden. And we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every day. And I have to say, I talked about it all week. The network was planning on doing some live stuff. It didn't. There was technical difficulties, and I am pleased to say that it wasn't the fault of Australian Wi-Fi. But we're going to get going here. We didn't know what was going to happen through this night, and of course, things can change, and maybe they change before some of you people listen to this podcast. But Frank, let's start with pick 24. The Bucks go with MarJon Beauchamp. He went to the G League Ignite. He was the second G League Ignite player taken on the night. And I bring that up because Dyson Daniels, the Australian star, was the first G League Ignite player to be taken. But MarJon Beauchamp, extremely emotional. And let me just say, before we get into any basketball analysis, one of the great stories of the night, one of the more emotional stories of the night. So certainly as far as my heartstrings went, very popular pick.
Yeah, I mean, doing kind of my draft prep, he was one of the guys I actually looked at a fair bit, and a guy that I actually I liked. I sort of was more falling on the side of liked. Didn't have him in kind of the Jalen Williams, like, oh my God, it really be amazing if he was their type guy. But I think again, just the two-way profile was really appealing, and in reading about him, it really is just a fascinating story, especially the fact that he ends up on the G League Ignite. That's sort of a program that was built for these really highly touted high school guys that, basically want to kill time for a year, make some money before they go pro rather than going to college. And he actually doesn't really fit into that mold because, and one of I think the downsides of him as a prospect is that he is an older prospect. He's 21, turns 22 in October. So again, like he's not, that 19-year-old, piece of clay that you're going to be able to mold into whatever. But he obviously, is again his experience playing high level competition is a bit strange because he was a pretty highly touted high school prospect. He was a 4-star prospect, top 40 type of guy. But then when COVID strikes, he didn't qualify academically to play college as a freshman. He ends up going to San Francisco to train with a trainer down there. I mean, a pretty well-known trainer. I guess the guy's trained Blake Griffin among other NBA players. But basically the idea was like, okay, we're going to train these guys, to be ready for the NBA draft rather than, again, going to college or doing something typical like that. And the problem was this is during COVID, and in San Francisco, there were no open gyms. Like they literally were doing outdoor workouts. They couldn't get into gyms. And eventually he goes back home to Yakima, Washington, and Joe Varden had a story in The Athletic that's worth reading about his background. But he's basically friends with guys that play for the Yakima Valley Junior Community College. His mom has known the coach of Yakima Valley since basically he was a little kid, and he ends up just kind of going in and screwing around, like playing pickup with them, and then ends up deciding to play for them. He plays 12 games for them, averages 30 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, shoots 40% from three, 77% from the foul line, just stuffing the stat sheet, has a 50-point game, which, you'd expect a guy of his capabilities to mop up against community college dudes. I will say, though, interesting that his three-point shooting, again, shorter line in college, but interesting that he shot so well, at least in that sample, because we'll get to sort of his game, but that obviously is his biggest question mark. But basically kind of like rediscovers his love of the game. He sort of was like rock bottom, when he was not able to play, and ends up coming back home to Washington, and ends up playing for this random community college, or not random to him, but random obviously in the grand scheme of basketball prospects and, kind of the draft and things like that. And that leads to him basically, I think Jamal Crawford put in the good word for him. Again, obviously Jamal, another big Seattle kind of Washington State legend. And Rod Strickland, who's kind of one of the guys that helps pick the G League Ignite team, ends up kind of watching him, seeing him in some doing some workouts, and then ends up inviting him to play for the Ignite last year. So a very circuitous path for him. But I think it helps paint the picture and helps explain why we saw the reaction that we did from him. And again, I mean, you could grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth and have, the easiest journey of all time to the pros. I mean, getting drafted can still be a super emotional thing regardless. But I think we've just seen multiple things. I think the Bucks tweeted a video of him getting the call live from John Horst, or after the draft with Coach Bud and Milton Newton, and he sounded like he was getting a really emotional again there. And multiple interviews. This just means so much to him, and I think he's a guy that certainly, a year and a half ago, again, even though he was a guy that probably thought at the end of high school that he was going to be an NBA player, was preparing for the 2021 NBA draft, but certainly probably felt like he was a long way from that, call it a year and a half ago. So just a cool story, and obviously I think we see a lot of references in some of the the interviews, and Milton Newton made some comments just about kind of what the Bucks liked in him. And again, I think the fact that he's had to work so hard to get to where he is, and we heard the phrase competitive spirit, which is a Coach Bud favorite phrase, referenced by Milton Newton. Maybe a little bit of a dog in him, Kane. I don't know. I'm thinking of our friend Mitchell Maurer, always loves tweeting out the little puppy dog whenever we talk about players being dogs. Shout out to PJ Tucker. So yeah, I mean, I think again, just a really cool story, and obviously now a story that we all get to root for firsthand here now that he's coming to Milwaukee. And ultimately, we didn't know what was going to happen with the Bucks. Would they trade up? Would they trade out? I don't think we really thought they were probably going to trade up in the draft, but ultimately they stay put, and seems like he was a guy that obviously they really liked, and certainly a guy, was brought in twice, worked out twice. Obviously they were looking closely at him. This was not a left field pick for them as an organization in terms of the work they put in and the due diligence they put in on him. So yeah, I mean, I think again, everybody gets really tied to certain players, certain picks, the ideas of certain guys leading up to the draft. And, a year later, we generally forget about all the guys that we were inevitably wrong about. Again, I think as a fan, you just sort of say, all right, these are the dudes we got, and let's root for those guys. And I think, regardless of what becomes of MarJon Beauchamp as an NBA player, we'll talk about sort of what kind of guy he might be, but he's gonna be a really easy guy to root for. That's for sure.
Yeah, and he was, and we spoke about this before the draft. There was this long list of guys that could have gone anywhere, like 15 to 30. Jalen Williams, who was very popular, ended up going number 12, so not even close to 24. We speculated that would be the case. He just kept on climbing. But Beauchamp was certainly a guy that we did speak about a little bit. Just before we talk about his actual play, this is just a couple of tweets that Eric put up from his Eric Name, excellent reporter for The Athletic, milk drinker. So it's not all positive, but he put up these quotes from his post game. So he said, man, I'm so excited playing with one of the greatest to play the game and a great team, to learn from them and to learn from Chris Middleton or all the vets they have. It's amazing. I just want to point out Buck's Twitter when he said one of the greatest of all time. He wasn't talking about Javon Carter. He was talking about Giannis and Chris Middleton. And then he followed it up by saying, man, I'm just blessed to be here. And I'm just ready to grow and become a basketball player and just keep working, because that's all I do. I work, and I can't wait to get to this new city. So good stuff. Again, he was emotional from there. So we'll get into what he does as a player after I talk about Arcade 1UP. We've got big news. The one and only NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1UP, the leader in at-home retro arcade games, is not only bringing the best game ever back, but they've made it bigger and better than ever with a Shaq Edition machine. People are obsessed with NBA Jam. I'm kind of one of those people. And in one of the first sports games to ever feature real and digitized NBA licensed teams, there's no fouls, no free throws, and no quarters required. Compete with friends and family through all new Wi-Fi leaderboards. making you more connected than ever. Pre-order now at arcade1up.com. That's arcade, the number one, up.com for an estimated early September ship date. They've got other classics there on the website as well. Mortal Kombat, among others, starting at $389 there. So check this out. The competition they've got, they're giving away an NBA Jam Shack edition to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/locked on. That's arcade, the number one, up.com/locked on. You've got till July 8 to enter to win the NBA Jam Shack edition console. Don't miss out. Enter today and have some fun with your new machine. All right, Frank, let's talk about MarJon Beauchamp, the player. And we spoke about the fact that in the modern NBA, you want guys, ideally, as many guys as you can that can play across multiple positions, defend multiple positions. That's kind of his calling card. You read any scouting report, you talk to anyone that's watched him play, they say, yeah, this is a guy that's a versatile defender. But he's also, you mentioned it, he's got a bit of a dog. He's got a bit of dog in him. He likes to hit the glass. He's a garbage man. He's not necessarily a guy that's creating his own shot to a high level yet. He's not necessarily a high level 3-point shooter yet. But to me, if you're picking at pick 24, you're always going to have a player that's kind of flawed. But I would rather take a guy that puts in the effort on the defensive end, does all the little things, and then you say, okay, well, is there development on the offensive end, rather than a guy that can just get you a bucket and doesn't defend. And I said it in our group message. I said he's kind of the anti-Jordan Nwora, and that's not even, I like Jordan Nwora, but you can see that Jordan, like if you're thinking about what Mike Budenholzer, who he will play, who he won't play, Jordan Nwora hasn't been able to get a look in because of the concerns on the defensive end. And it's not to say that Beauchamp is going to walk straight into the rotation and play, but it's the framework of the type of player that you can understand why the Bucks would have been intrigued and interested by his game.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we've talked about, right, like in terms of skills that are projectable, skills that can develop, again, you can't teach 6'7", 7'1" wingspan, motor, athleticism, fluidity, the kind of physical package, right? You can obviously kind of put guys in the weight room, which is something that he did. I mean, he was at, I think, 175 coming out of high school, has gotten up to 200, 205, something like that. And it's kind of funny when I saw his weight number after watching some like scouting report video, I was actually kind of surprised because he plays, I think, a little, again, at least in sort of this G League footage, it seems like he plays a little stronger. And I think he plays a little more rugged than, that weight would indicate. So I think, obviously, defensively, he'll have to go through an adjustment, but he certainly looks like a guy that should be able to defend twos and threes. Does he get strong enough, savvy enough to become, a small ball 4 type guy that can give you those types of minutes as well? I'm sure in certain configurations you can do that, depending on who's in there for the other team. I think he's got that kind of wiry frame. He's got that good length. It seems like he has good hands, good anticipation, nearly a block a game. It's kind of weird. I was looking at some of the G League stats. Like they have sort of the showcase and they also have exhibition games. And I think, played roughly similar numbers of each. You average, I think, 0.8 blocks in the one and 1.1 blocks in the other, and about a 1.5 steals in both. So, certainly in terms of just like kind of making plays defensively, which again, getting steals isn't necessarily the measure of a good defender or anything like that. But the activity levels, I think, are certainly something that stand out for him defensively. And, at sort of 6'6", 6'7", to be blocking nearly a shot a game and, getting steals, and again, the kind of offensive rebounding, just again, sort of some of the activity level stuff is obviously welcome. Dante DiVincenzo, who is obviously a bit shorter and smaller than him. Obviously, I think one of the ways he contributed pretty quickly, even though his jump shot was inconsistent, was by, being able to sort of make plays with his athleticism. And I think certainly, MarJon's a bit bigger, projects more as like kind of, like more of a true swingman than Dante, who's obviously a bit smaller. So yeah, I think if you just think in terms of like ways that he can impact the game right away, right? Like how does he get any minutes as a rookie, right? I think it's going to be tough when, you start off with Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Giannis eating up, a huge portion of the minutes from 1 through 4. Again, the shooting guard minutes, obviously right now you've got Grayson Allen. We hope to see Wes Matthews back. We'll see what happens with George Hill. He played, a fair bit with Drew Holiday as well, and kind of two guard configurations. So we'll see kind of where his opportunities are. Certainly at this point, the shooting guard spot is probably the spot that has the most kind of minutes up for grabs. Pat Connaughton obviously fits in across those 2-3 slots as well. And we talked about him yesterday, and obviously excited to see Pat coming back on a team-friendly number, at least this year. So again, not a direct kind of path for him. Like obviously, like, oh yeah, he'll just take these, 20 minutes a game and, play as a rookie. But again, you never know with injuries. Unfortunately, found out in the playoffs, you never know when injuries might crop up, and there may be a need to have a guy that kind of get a shot. We'll see if they give him much running with the herd. Typically the Bucks haven't really given kind of their rookies, especially first round picks. It's been a while since we had one, but typically the first round picks haven't really played at all with the G League. Like DJ Wilson eventually going down was kind of like a sign of problems, I would say. But obviously, again, there's at least that option to kind of maybe give him some random run with the herd. But either way, I think the defense is going to be, at least initially, that's kind of like his floor. It comes from, I think, what he can do defensively, and then offensively, the shooting is obviously the huge swing skill. I think he's really good in transition, good cutter, as I said, good offensive rebounder, kind of that garbage man type skill set at the wings isn't kind of typical, but given the role he's going to play, that actually could be, something that could, be a useful skill set. But again, what will determine whether he can be potentially, I think his upside is as a solid starter, kind of complementary player, role playing starter. I think that's probably his upside. I think in that scenario is one where, he has to be a guy that can knock down open threes and, become more consistent on that end. 27% from three and kind of limited action in the G League last year. Obviously, that's nothing to write home about. Doesn't really get to the foul line much at all. And so I think, again, the offense is going to come on kind of being opportunistic, getting out in transition. He's not a guy that you're going to, give the ball to and let him cook, right? That's really not his role. But I think to his credit, he's kind of figured that out, and he's been a guy that, realizes that he's got to go and, again, do the little things, kind of make plays off the ball, again, get out in transition and do those things. So, does he solve the Bucks offensive problems that they had in the Celtics series? Well, he won't do it next year, and I don't know that he's ever going to be the kind of guy that really solves that for you. But I think the thing is, the offense shooting to me is the one thing that you kind of can just kind of gamble with a little bit, because again, the physical tools, you can't easily develop that stuff. The motor, you can't just develop that. But as we've seen, a lot of guys who come in the league as maybe not great shooters, again, you just never know what's going to happen. Guys work hard. Some of those guys actually turn out to be pretty good shooters. And, I think Bobby Webster, the Raptors, he's technically the Raptors GM. Obviously, he works under Masai Ujiri, but I think he made a comment the other day, sort of half joking about, what do the Raptors look for? Well, they look at, defense, versatility, and they don't really worry about shooting, right? That's kind of their MO. And, they gambled with OG Anunoby, who was not a shooter in college. Pascal Siakam, who was not a shooter in college. Scotty Barnes was not a shooter in college. I don't think MarJon Beauchamp is going to become any one of those guys down the road. But I think, again, there's another, this is not the Bucks kind of going off the reservation, picking a guy who's not a proven shooter. So I think for everybody who's worried that like, oh, well, how can you not put shooters around Giannis? Again, if you want a well-rounded player at this spot of the draft, you're probably going to have to gamble on something. And to me, I'm okay with gambling on, a guy maybe having to develop the shooting a bit, because, hey, even if he's not ever going to be a 40% three-point shooter, if he can get good enough and be able to do kind of little things, cutting some of that other stuff off the ball, then, you can be really valuable. And I think show him footage of Pat Connaughton, right? Pat has done really well kind of figuring out how to do those small things in the Bucks offense, and has become a very consistent three-point shooter. So, again, if there's an archetype offensively for him to look at, I think Pat's probably a good guy to try to model himself after.
Honestly, Frank, I think overall, as I summarize everything you just went through, I would have to say it was honestly pretty positive. But you still couldn't help yourself by throwing in the he might or probably won't ever become anything. You just couldn't give us one night. Just give us one night for the people. Let the people ease into the weekend feeling good about themselves and feeling and just one weekend of thinking that this guy is a future All NBA player. By the way, you mentioned some of the comments from John Horst and Milt Newton and all those guys. Milt Newton said that he might be the best athlete on the team besides Giannis, which certainly could be possible. But I was imagining Pat Connaughton at home. Just he's thinking to himself, what do I have to do to get some respect about my athleticism around this franchise? I've just taken a pay cut, and you're saying, and now I'm the third most athletic player on the team. So that was a bit rough there for Pat. But yeah, I think again, you just sort of mentioned it, but we said with a lot of these guys, like there's going to be something missing from their game, and we'll see what they pan out to be. I actually, and this comes, and again, I promise you, it's not just Australian propaganda. I'm not just trying to talk about Dyson Daniels at every opportunity here, but we had him in Australia, and the reason, and I was trying to get information out of him about Jaden Hardy because I thought he was going to be in the range that the Bucks were going to pick. And he just continually kept coming back to MarJon Beauchamp about how strong he is, the fact that he does play above his size, and he is just naturally a strong guy. And it's interesting when you think about the path he's had the last 2 years to then step into the G League, play against men in this sort of new developmental pathway that they've got with the G League Ignite. I don't know. I'm interested to see working out with the Bucks in an NBA franchise, the full-time environment, what he gets out of that physically as well. So yeah, I mean, again, you're working on the percentages, which are based over years and years and years, which makes perfect sense. But as far as guys that were in the range, and I think we were sort of messaging in a DM at the time when it came to pick 24, and we're like, look, it's probably the guy. I wasn't. EJ Liddell was the other guy, and he ended up going pick 41 or pick 42. Justin Lewis later in the second round was a guy that we mentioned. He ended up getting picked up on a two-way by the Chicago Bulls. Apologies to Mitchell Maurer. He's crying in his living room as we speak right now. Let's talk about the trade the Bucks made after betonline.net, which is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs. I think that might be one game away from being finished, and the Major League Baseball. If you want to put some money on an outsider, I can recommend the Oakland Athletics. I think they've won 7 out of their last 50 games or something like that. It doesn't seem to be going well for my Athletics. But BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And they got podcasts, all types of stuff over there, and different sports as well, MMA, boxing, and golf. You've got the NBA championship odds for next year. I mentioned it. The Bucks still 8-1 there. Probably 4-1 now after the pickup of Beauchamp. Head to the
Hugo Besson is really swinging it, right?
Besson. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Frank, so this one, I was just getting a little sleepy on the couch, had the feet up. You were saying, should we start the podcast? And then the notification came through. The Bucks picked up the last pick, which I would like to say is just the middle finger to the league. You said, you want to take away our pick, which would have been 58, 59, or 60? Well, cop this. We're trading back in. And they did. It was the Pacers pick, the last pick in the draft, and they picked up Hugo Besson, the French sharpshooter, who actually played for the New Zealand Breakers in the NBL, so I covered him all season. This is, it was interesting that they traded back in. We spoke about the roster spots that they had and what they're going to do. It doesn't mean that Besson is even going to be with the team when the season starts. I know on the broadcast they mentioned that maybe he would play overseas. We'll see how this plays out here, but it's at least interesting that the Bucks picked up another late selection. We know last year they made the trade for 2 late selections. They picked up Kalatakis, which he didn't last too long with the team there, which we thought might have been a bit of a favor. But Hugo Besson is a guy that has legitimate skill. Do you have any thoughts about the process of the trade? I'm not expecting you to have done a full Hugo Besson scouting report.
No, I mean, I saw, just reading about the draft in particular, I saw, some of the people I read let's just say we're very skeptical of him as an NBA player. So probably fitting that he would go 58. And you mentioned me, throwing the cold bucket of ice water on an otherwise night filled of hopes and dreams. I just brought up the chart that I asked our friends Seth Partnow and Eric Name if they still had this chart which Seth had put together that shows kind of like historical draft outcomes by draft position, and it's a pretty sobering reminder of just how hard it is to
There's
kind of
literally
pan
no
out.
need for this. If you want to waste another 4 minutes talking about this dumbass chart, then go ahead. But
Well, the guys picked 50 plus are like, 90% bust, 5% just a guy, and a tiny, tiny fraction become a higher rotation or top starter. 20 to 20, I'll throw this on just for the 20 to 25 range. About 35% maybe bust, 30% just a guy, and then looks like maybe 10 to 15% become high rotation, and maybe 10% become what they call a top starter, and few percent borderline all star. So I mean, you can find great players in that range, right? I think again, it's do you take the Dumb and Dumber sort of, so you're telling me there's a chance, glasses, 1/4, 1/8 full view of that, or do you kind of focus on the negative? I like to just think of it, the past decade, the Bucks have gotten a lot of those busts and just a guys out of the way. So now they're kind of due, right, for finding guys that can be high rotation or top starters. But anyway, yeah, just again to calibrate, and not so much. You don't have to look at it through the lens of the Bucks, what's going to happen to the Bucks guys, but that's just the reality of how hard it is for all these other guys, right? If you had like 10 guys in the second round that you loved and you can't believe that the Bucks didn't pick them, odds are they're going to suck. So anyway, Kane, that's the end of my mean-spirited dream crushing for the night. But I think as far as Hugo Besson goes, yeah, I mean, I hope we see him in Vegas for Summer League. Always fun to see kind of like, offensive guards in Vegas, since those guys often, can kind of do what they want and have a chance to obviously get a lot of shots up. Physical profile, obviously nothing to write home about. What is he, 6'3", 6'4", something like that?
mm-hmm.
Not athletic, but just kind of a wily skill guy. Certainly the very fluid shooting stroke. Shooting numbers were really not great though. 3-point numbers were pretty poor, but I think you mentioned before we came on that didn't really have much kind of around him. So yeah, we'll see. I have no expectations that he ever becomes anything for the Bucks, but the speculation, I think, on the one hand, we talked the other day about how there's really not much room on the Bucks roster, in terms of the roster math, right? Like they really don't need 2 rookies this year. So I was a bit surprised when we kind of heard the news that they were going to be trading into that last pick, and so I think the immediate assumption was either they are popping up there to pick a guy that they can roster for the rookie minimum, which has a lower cap number, by I think like probably $700,000 or $800,000 than if they sign a veteran to fill that spot. But they really don't need another rookie to kind of fill out the roster. So I don't know. I'm curious. I'm definitely curious to see kind of what they do with him, and if he does come over, if he doesn't come over. Certainly the Bucks have not been a team that has been like big on stashing guys, right? I mean, like Kalaitzakis clearly was not a guy that you'd say, oh, look, that guy needs to come over to the NBA right away. But I think they paid a small buyout in order to get him over to Milwaukee, and ended up obviously waiving him a couple months into the season. So we'll see, but hey, happy to be proven wrong, and would be great if we could get maybe some fun games in Las Vegas with Hugo and MarJon doing some stuff in Summer League.
Yeah, I don't know what he projects to be NBA-wise. Defensively was the problems, but he was playing in a team that had basically no veterans. They were stuck in Australia. They didn't even go to New Zealand. he got signed by New Zealand and he never went to New Zealand because they were stuck in Australia for the whole season. So every game was a road game. So it was just a really
few things I can imagine being worse than being stuck in Australia for a whole basketball season. So
well, you say that, but I went to this guy's hotel room to do a big feature for the Jump. We did a big video feature, and let's just say I would have thought they would have been staying somewhere nicer than they were staying. That's all I'll say about that. But one quick
What's he like? What's he like?
Well, he's lovely, and I tell you what, I'm putting my nuts on the line. If Hugo Besson,
please don't.
If Hugo Besson, I'm not putting my nuts on the screen. I'm putting them on the line. If he plays Summer League, he will have a 13-point quarter. I was going to say 15. That might be a stretch. So I'm saying that he'll have a 13-point quarter. This guy absolutely lit it up in stretches, and it like his shot making ability is crazy. I don't care what the percentages say. One of the games, the first game I saw him play live, he just had COVID, and he had COVID really bad. I think he lost up to 10 kilos in 2 weeks from COVID, and then he went straight from that, played the game. And I was talking to the owner of the team at halftime, and I said, "You guys look like you're struggling." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I just don't think Hugo can do anything in this game. He's just lost 10 kilos in the last 2 weeks." And then in the last 6 minutes of this game, he scored 16 straight points against one of the better teams in the league. He was pulling up from three all over the place. He was driving to the rack. It was honestly crazy to see. And he had stretches like that through the season. So defensively, I don't know what he projects to be as a professional in general, but he's fun when he gets hot. So I bet you he'll do that, and he'll rope in some Bucks fans at Summer League. That's my prediction.
And kind of interesting. I was looking kind of at like measurements. He 6'3", 6'4" in some measurements, but he did go to the draft combine, measured 6'5" and 3/4 in shoes, 6'5" and a half wingspan. So negative wingspan guy, or kind of even wingspan guy. And I want to say, do you know if he was in the
tough scene for Frank? He was about to just ask me a seriously important question. I can tell you. I don't know whether he was in the whatever Frank was about to say. Do I know Frank's back? And maybe he's not back. His internet is having some problems here. But this is one of the great cliffhangers in the history of Locked On Bucks. His internet is having some problems here. He's just a frozen screen if you're watching on YouTube. So we'll try and push on here for a little bit. But if Frank doesn't come back, we'll call it a day, and we'll call it a draft night. I'll continue working over here in Australia, and we'll wrap it up. So it looks like Frank's gone, but that's okay. I can wrap it up from here. MarJon Beauchamp at pick 24, Hugo Besson at pick 58. We'll have plenty more time to talk about those two guys. Make sure you jump in the YouTube comments. Let us know what you think. And I'm going to finish this with one of the great tweets that I saw tonight on Twitter. It comes from me. Jalen Duren not going to Minnesota is a missed opportunity. Duren would be hungry like the wolf. We'll see you guys next week.